For 99% of human history, you could live your entire life, grow old and die, without ever once knowing what your own face looked like. You knew every line on your mother's face, you knew the exact shape of your child's nose, but your own features were a complete mystery. You might catch a distorted, rippling glimpse of yourself in a dark pool of water on a completely still day, but one breeze would shatter the image. The face you presented to the world belonged to the world, not to you. Imagine not knowing if you had a smudge of dirt on your cheek or what you looked like when you smiled. That was the human experience for hundreds of thousands of years. You were entirely blind to your own identity. We take our reflections completely for granted today, but the invention of the very first obsidian mirrors caused a massive psychological shift in human evolution, fundamentally changing how we viewed the self. Figuring out how to polish volcanic glass did not just give early humans a shiny new tool, it birthed vanity, self-awareness, and a bizarre new connection to the spirit world. To understand how this single object rewired the human ego, we have to look at the exact moment a human being first held a stone, polished it until it gleamed, and stared back at their own eyes. Let us go back about 8,000 years to a massive ancient settlement called Çatalhöyük, located in what is now modern-day Turkey. This is a place where early humans are just starting to figure out civilization. They're living in tightly packed mud brick houses, climbing through roofs to get inside, and hunting wild cattle. But the people of Çatalhöyük sit on a massive geographical gold mine. They have access to obsidian. Obsidian is a naturally occurring volcanic glass. When lava cools incredibly fast, it forms a dense, pitch-black rock that fractures with edges sharper than modern surgical steel. Obsidian was the ultimate cutting tool. But someone in Çatalhöyük realized this dark stone had another property. If you took a piece of obsidian, ground it flat against another rough stone, and then patiently polished it with sand, clay, and water for days on end, something magical happened. The black surface stopped being a rock and started being a window. Creating an obsidian mirror was brutal, exhausting work. You would sit for hours, rubbing wet grit in slow circles. Slowly, the scratches vanished, the surface turned glossy, and then, for the first time in history, a person held up a polished black stone and saw a hyper-realistic, unbroken reflection of their own face. This was not a rippling puddle. This was a solid object you could hold in your hand, angle in the light, and stare into for hours. The sheer shock of that moment is hard for us to grasp. Imagine seeing a stranger holding your exact expression, matching your every blink. It was terrifying and mesmerizing all at once. For the first time, a human being could study the shape of their own jawline, the wrinkles around their eyes, the exact color of their hair. They could look into their own eyes and recognize themselves as a distinct, separate individual. The psychological impact was immediate. Before the mirror, your identity was entirely tied to your tribe. You were part of a collective. But the moment you could see yourself clearly, you became an individual. You could start to alter your appearance. You could pluck a stray hair, paint your face with absolute precision, or adjust an ornament, not because someone else told you it looked good, but because you decided it did. The mirror birthed vanity, but it also birthed a deep, isolating sense of self-consciousness. But here is where the story of the first mirrors takes a sharp, unexpected turn. Early humans did not look into these polished stones and just see a grooming tool. They thought they were looking into another dimension. Obsidian mirrors are not bright and silver like the mirrors in your bathroom. They are dark, smoky, and deeply reflective, swallowing light rather than bouncing all of it back. When you look into a polished black stone, especially by the flickering light of a fire, your face appears suspended in a dark void. To an ancient mind, this was not science, it was magic. The mirror was immediately viewed as a portal. The reflection was not just an image,
It was a soul, an ancestor, or a captive soul, trapped within the stone. Because of this, mirrors were considered dangerous objects, often carefully wrapped up or buried with the dead rather than left lying around. If a mirror broke, it was not just a piece of damaged property. It was a fracture in reality, a danger to the soul of the person who owned it.
This fear and reverence of mirrors spread across human history. Thousands of years later and half a world away, the ancient Aztecs and Maya would independently discover obsidian mirrors. They too would link them immediately to the supernatural. The Aztec god of night and magic was named Tezcatlipoca, which literally translates to smoking mirror. He was believed to watch the deeds of humanity through a polished black stone, using the mirror to cross between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. Priests would stare into these dark mirrors for hours in sensory deprivation, waiting for the smoke to clear and visions to appear. The mirror had evolved from a shocking new technology into an instrument of profound religious terror. You have to wonder what those first mirror makers felt when they saw the dark world inside the stone. Did they feel they had created something beautiful? Or did they feel they had accidentally opened a door that was never meant to be opened? This explains why so many ancient cultures developed bizarre superstitions around mirrors that still survive today. The idea that breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck stems directly from the ancient belief that a mirror holds a piece of your soul. If the glass shatters, your soul shatters with it. Even today, the practice of covering mirrors when someone dies originates from the fear that a spirit could get trapped in the glass. Over the next few millennia, the dark, smoky portals of obsidian were gradually replaced. As humans mastered metallurgy, they realized they could polish copper, bronze, and eventually silver to a brilliant shine. These metal mirrors were brighter, clearer, and much harder to break, but they were also incredibly expensive. For thousands of years, a high-quality mirror was the ultimate status symbol. Only the ultra-wealthy could afford to know exactly what they looked like. The average peasant was still largely guessing. It was not until the invention of silvered glass in the 19th century that mirrors finally became cheap and accessible to everyone. The mirror went from a sacred, terrifying, magical artifact to a cheap piece of glass hanging on every bedroom wall. But the psychological shift that started in Çatalhöyük 8,000 years ago never went away. The invention of the mirror permanently altered human behavior. Before we could see ourselves, our brains were completely outwardly focused. We watched the weather, we watched the animals, we watched each other. The mirror forced us to turn our gaze inward. It made us hyper-aware of our flaws, our aging, and our physical differences. It created the very concept of body image. Today, we are surrounded by mirrors. They're in our cars, our elevators, and the front-facing cameras of our phones. We spend our lives constantly monitoring our own image, adjusting our hair, practicing our smiles, and judging our reflections. We have become utterly obsessed with the one thing our ancestors lived happily without. The shiny surface we glance at dozens of times a day is the exact same technology that terrified early humans and birthed gods of the night. Think about the sheer volume of modern humans spend curating their visual identity. Entire industries, from cosmetics to fashion to social media, are built entirely on the foundation of the mirror. None of this exists without that first, painstaking effort to polish a piece of volcanic glass. We traded the comfort of not knowing for the heavy burden of self-awareness. The mirror gave us our faces, but it also gave us a lifelong obsession with how the rest of the world perceives us. The next time you walk past a mirror and catch your own eye, take a second to realize what you are actually doing. You were performing an act of self-recognition that was physically impossible for almost all of human history. You were staring into an ancient portal that changed the human mind forever. If you want to keep exploring the weird, overlooked history of everyday things, hit the subscribe button. There's a lot more to discover.